Hi, and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 612, and today's date is March 10th, 2015, and the title of this episode is The De-Dollarization Continues. China and Russia prepare to drop the SWIFT system. Let's get right into the economic collapse news. Now, we understand that Greece is still having discussions with the ECB. The ECB is out there, and they're saying, listen, if you want more money, you want another loan, you're going to have to implement austerity. You're going to have to show us what you're going to do. Now, again, the Syriza party ran on the platform that they're going to get rid of austerity, that they're not going to take on more debt. But when we look at the Eurogroup, they are showing a sign that there would be no retreat from finalizing an austerity package. So they're not moving away from austerity, because every time the central bankers give you a loan, they want you to implement austerity. They want the country to collapse so they can buy up the natural resources for pennies on the dollar and then resell it once the country gets back on its feet, or sell it to other investors. And we can see this is exactly what they're trying to do to Greece. We see the Syriza government trying to step away from this, and we have to continually look at the situation and try to understand what they're doing within these 4 months, because they received 4 months of emergency loans. They've been talking to Russia. They've been talking to China. Russia extended a hand by saying, listen, if you leave the Eurozone, we will remove the food ban. We understand they redesigned the drachma. And they have to the Syriza party has to be very careful at this point, because if the people see that they're actually making a deal with the ECB and they're going to impose austerity, this is going to be a huge problem for them. But again, we don't know what's going on behind closed doors, and we're going to have to watch this closely. But we can see at this point, the ECB wants them to put together an austerity package. Now, we see out in Canada, and this is starting to spread now, where it happened back in 2007, 2008, where the housing market started to fall apart and other countries started to feel it. In February, housing starts in Canada, they dropped to 16.4%. This is the lowest since 2009. Of course, they're blaming this all on the weather. It was terrible weather. This is why we're seeing this. But the trend in housing starts decreased for a fifth consecutive month in February, and reflects a decreasing trend in multiple starts, said Chief Economist Bob Dugan. And so this isn't a fluke. We're seeing the trend that housing is falling apart. Multifamily urban starts, they're the hardest hit in Canada. They have plunged by 25%. No one is escaping this collapse. We see that it is definitely spreading. I mean, look at Target in Canada. They closed all their stores. If the economy is booming and expanding and people are going out and spending their money, they wouldn't close all the stores, lay off 17,000 people, and then cut their funds here in the United States and lay off people here in the United States. And they're additionally closing stores here in the U.S. Many retailers are going out of business. Why is this? Well, as we know, consumer spending, it's just not there. We talked about this. People are not purchasing in cash. People are not purchasing using their credit cards. They're only getting what they need to survive. Most of the people don't have an income to support them going out and purchasing a new TV, a new house, a new car, electronics, or anything else. So they're just going out and doing what is needed to survive. And we can see by lowering the gas prices, we're on the 4th month right now. This has not changed anything. Actually, the situation has gotten worse. Lower gas prices, spending has gone down, not up. It's gone the opposite way. The trend in consumer spending has slowed across many sectors. Sales and furniture and clothing stores have weakened, reflecting a decline in demand for bigger ticket items. So we can see that things are not going well. And we look at companies, corporations, they are laying off people. Target They announced that they're going to lay off 3,100 people here in the United States. Aerojet Rocketdyne, 500 people. Sony Mobile Phone Unit, 1,000. This is in Sweden. Merck and AstraZeneca in Boston, 200. Telsa Motors, about 180. U.S. Steel Lorraine Tubular Operations, 614 people. The layoffs are continuing. Stores are closing. People are losing their jobs in the energy sector. Where are they going to find work? They're not. They're going to mostly find part-time work, or they're not going to find work at all. And we can see right now that the wholesale sales plunge and factory orders are getting worse. This is the worst we've seen it since Lehman Brothers. For the first time since Lehman, wholesale trade sales dropped for a third month in a row in January, plunging 3.1% month on month. They expected only a negative 0.5% drop, but they got a 3.1 drop instead. This is the biggest drop since March 2009. If we exclude autos and wholesale sales, it fell by 3.5%. And we can see factory orders are declining. The Baltic Dry Index right now is holding steady at 568. That means the raw material that is being shipped to factories is not needed at this point because consumers are not spending. So you don't have to create things in the factory. If you don't have to create things in the factory, you don't need the raw materials. And this is what we're seeing right now. We're seeing signs that the stock market is at its peak. And it's happening right now. Just before a stock market crash, price-earnings ratios tend to spike. And this is precisely what we are witnessing right now. The average bull market lasts for about 3.8 years. The current bull market has lasted up to 6. Basically, the central bankers, the U.S. government, have taken over the entire stock market. It's completely manipulated at this point. The median total gain during bull market is about 101.5%. For this bull market, it's 213%. Usually, before a stock market crash, we see a divergence between the relative strength index and the stock market itself. This happened prior to the dot-com bubble and prior to 2008. And it's happening right now. The central bankers are trying to hold everything together. We see the real estate market, as we reported, it is completely falling apart. Prices are coming down. New and existing home sales are dropping. Houses are staying on the market longer and longer. Corporations, financial corporations like Bank of America, Wells Fargo, Citibank, laying off people in their mortgage departments. They're trying to keep the interest rates down at 0%. They are starting new programs with Freddie and Fannie, trying to bring in the subprime people. A lot of the banks now are starting their programs of 100% finance, and they'll even pay for the closing costs. According to Black Knight Financial, both new and repeat foreclosures hit a 12-month high during the first month of the year, with repeats going higher. They're jumping to 11%. More troubling is the trend in repeat foreclosures. They're even higher. They're at 51%. All those people that had modified loans who were helped out, they're foreclosing now. The situation is turning down, and this is why we see the United States government central bankers provoking war around the world. They need to cover this up. We see the U.S. government, they would like to audit the Fed. There's a audit the Fed bill. And the Federal Reserve and media have launched numerous attacks on the audit the Fed legislation. These attacks amount to nothing more than distortions about the effects and the intent of the audit bill. They don't want it to happen. Some claim that the audit bill is not only dangerous, but is also unnecessary since the Fed is already audited. It is true, yes, the Fed does some auditing. It's limited, but the audits that they want will reveal the amount of assets on the Fed's balance sheets. The audit, the Fed bill will reveal what was purchased, what was acquired, and why it was acquired. They don't want people to know this. And this is why they're fighting it. You have to remember, the Fed is a private corporation. They want their books and everything they're doing to stay private because it's not in the best interest of the people. It's in the best interest to the Fed and to those people who are running the Fed and to those people who are looking to make profit off of debt because debt is their product. Perhaps the real reason the Federal Reserve fears a full audit can be revealed by examining the one-time audit of the Federal Reserve's response to the financial crisis authorized by the Dodd-Frank law. This audit found that between 2007 and 2010, the Federal Reserve committed over $16 trillion more than 4 times the annual budget of the United States to foreign central banks and politically influential private companies. For over a century, the Federal Reserve has operated in secrecy to the benefit of the elites and the detriment of the people. It is now time really to end the Fed. We really don't need them. There's no reason to have this whatsoever. The government, if they can produce treasury bonds, guess what? They can create their own money without interest. There's no reason for a private central bank whatsoever. Don't need it. We see the United States is discussing removing Russia from the SWIFT system. The U.S. Treasury Department is still evaluating and discussing the impacts of expelling Russia from the SWIFT interbank payment system. The framework that we evaluate all potential action is basically the impact they would have on the Russian economy against the spillover and blowback to the United States and the European partners. Well, Russia is prepared for this. This is why they created their own payment system. And it's up and running right now. They expected this to happen. Even China is out there, and they knew eventually they would have to start their payment system. And they did. China's international payment system, known simply as China's International Payment System, CIPS, serves to process cross-border yuan transactions, and it is ready. And it could be launched as early as September or October. The launch will then remove one of the biggest hurdles to internationalizing the yuan and should greatly increase global usage of the Chinese currency by cutting transaction costs and processing time. It would also put the yuan on a more even footing with other major global currencies like the US dollar. And we can see that CIPS is expected to use the same messaging format as other international payment systems, making transactions smoother. The U.S. pushed Russia into developing their payment system with sanctions and provoking them for war. So they said, you know something, we need to separate ourselves from the West. We need to de-dollarize. We need to make sure that we can sustain ourselves outside of their system. China is doing the same exact thing. They accelerated their program because they realize what is coming. And again, this will help the yuan renminbi become a reserve currency. And we have to remember, in this year, the IMF is going to look at the currency, the China's currency, and decide if it meets all the qualifications of becoming a reserve currency. Of course, the United States might step in and try to stop what is happening. Now, we see that all the credit rating agencies here in the United States are lowering Russia's credit rating rating. And we can see the Daegong, the Chinese rating agency, which was created because they didn't agree with the West's credit rating agency, they give a completely different rating. And they're saying that the U.S. rating agencies, Moody's, Standard & Poor's, and Fitch, they're using American political and ideological thinking to assess Russia's risk of sovereign debt. As a result, Russia's credit rating are dropped. But when assessing a country's credit standing, the U.S. credit rating agencies mainly emphasize the following factors: political system, GDP per capita, independence of a country's central bank, economic system, and the level of market privatization. But when we look at this, this has nothing to do with the government's ability to generate revenue and its ability to repay debt. If one uses these standards to assess the United States, we would have a whole completely different picture. But of course, they say, well, yeah, if we look at the United States, they're able to create money, and this is why they don't have a problem. Well, I would say this is a bigger problem. Just like any household, as you keep continually getting more and more credit cards, and you don't have the revenue coming in to pay for the interest on the debt, eventually what happens is the country will break down and collapse. Just like a person who's continually bringing on more and more credit card debt, and they're only making $50,000 a year. Once your credit card debt is at $150,000, $200,000, and your income's not going up, you can't maintain the debt anymore. The same thing's happening in the United States. As we continually add more and more debt by the trillions every year, the revenue isn't there to sustain it. So what is the government doing? They're looking to get more revenue in, and they're running out of places to get it. But don't worry. They're always thinking of new ideas, new ways of bringing in revenue, just in case something happens. Now, a lot of people believe that Obama right now is helping the students with their student loans by giving them a new bankruptcy option. But this is no way true. Basically, what's happening right now is that when you have a loan, a student loan, you are responsible for it, and you cannot go bankrupt and get rid of the student loan. It is yours, and you have to repay it. They've been trying to modify the loans to help people out, because all these kids that are coming out of college, they can't find work. They're finding part-time work, but they're not finding those high-paying jobs. And we see the student loan bubble has grown. It's over $1 trillion right now. And we see that 9% of the students who have these loans are in default, and 12% of the loans are in deferment, and 11% in forbearance. And it is a risk to the system. And if the bubble pops, the government, the central bank, can't get the money anywhere, because the people didn't have the money to pay the loan, so they have no money to get out of them. There's no way to get it. So what Obama and the central bankers decided to do, they said, hey, let's give them a bankruptcy option where they can declare bankruptcy and get rid of their student loan. Yes, it helps some of the students, but what it's going to help the central bank then. Because when the bubble pops and all these people are going into bankruptcy, who can bail out the system now? Almost like what happened in 2008 with all the corporations. They were filing bankruptcy. Who can bail them out at this point? The government. So this is exactly why they're doing this at this point. It's kind of makes it seem like they're helping the students, but really what they're doing is they're helping themselves to a new mega bailout system by allowing these people to go bankrupt. This money then is the debt is then freed. The taxpayers, the government can say, okay, we need to cover the losses in the student loan. Now we can issue the money. And this is exactly what they're doing at this point. Now, yesterday we talked about how Obama, the central bankers are out there, and they've been trying for years to ban weapons. They're also trying to ban ammunition right now. We talked about how they're trying to ban the 5.56 M855 green tip, where they're saying it's a cop killer, and we talked about how it was never used to kill any cops whatsoever. We see that 52 senators right now have joined to oppose the Obama administration move to ban the ammo. And we can see that they've written a letter. The senator said that the 5.56 M855 green tip cartridge was exempted in the 1986 law, along with other rifle ammo from bans on armor-piercing rounds. The reason popular rifle ammo is not used in shootouts with police. They've also raised new concerns that the administration is now moving towards other ammunition to ban. And we can see they're heading down this path where they're going to try to get rid of all the ammo. And if you don't have ammo, what can you do with a weapon? There's nothing you can do with it because you have nothing to put in it to fire. So we can see right now they're out there and they're very concerned about this. And they're saying that the Second Amendment requires not only access to firearms, but to bullets. Listen, if a law-abiding citizen, if they can't find rifle ammunition, or they face substantial difficulty in finding ammunition available at reasonable prices because of the government, well, then the Second Amendment is at risk. Again, we have to look at the Second Amendment. It says it cannot be infringed upon, cannot be limited. And this is what the government is trying to do at every single turn, because they understand when this system collapses, and we know it is. We see all the indicators. Yes, they can keep this going for a certain period of time, but eventually, one day you're going to wake up and everyone is going to be completely shocked. I know, it's hard to believe, but when we look at what's going on in the real economy, looking at the indicators, we're leading up to this. Everything is manipulated today to make you believe we are in a recovery. And people are going to be shocked when this thing comes tumbling down. And again, they understand that people are going to say, hey, wait, what just happened here? You just told us everything was fine. And of course, they're going to blame it on another country or group. This is their plan, because they don't want to be blamed, because they're planning to start the entire system over again. But they understand that even if they blame another country or group, the collapse is still going to happen. People are going to make a run to the market. People are going to be very scared and nervous. They're going to lose jobs. They're going to have no money. And the government needs to control the people. Plus, they're very nervous that these people might say, you know something? You did this. The central banking did this. We don't need you or them. This is what they're mostly afraid of. They're afraid that the people are going to rise up and threaten their authority. Now, Wikipedia is suing the NSA. They're filing a lawsuit against the National Security Agency to protect the rights of 500 million people who use Wikipedia every month. They said, we're doing so because a fundamental pillar of democracy is at stake, the free exchange of knowledge and ideas. The lawsuit against the NSA is with the mass surveillance of internet traffic on the American soil, often called upstream surveillance, which violates the Fourth Amendment, which protects the right to privacy, as well as the First Amendment, which protects the freedoms of expression and association. Whenever someone oversees, views, or edits a Wikipedia page, it is likely that the NSA is tracking that activity, including the content of what was read or typed, as well as other information that can be linked to the person's physical location and possible identity. These activities are sensitive and private. But again, the U.S. government, the central bankers, they don't care about your privacy. They wish the Constitution didn't even exist. They wish that you didn't have these rights, so they can do whatever they want. Look at Ukraine. Look at the Middle East. Look at Africa. When they take over these countries, all those people who oppose the new government are called terrorists. Think about that for a second. And again, everything they're doing is a violation of the Fourth Amendment, and Wikipedia is looking at this and saying, you just can't spy on everybody. And this is why they're bringing this lawsuit and suing the NSA. Actually, every single person in the United States should be suing the NSA at this point, because they violated every single person's Fourth Amendment. And we should bring a lawsuit. They should be able to, through the Freedom of Information Act, get the information. Of course, they're going to say, because of national security, we can't release this. And again, they use this as an excuse because things that they are doing that are illegal, they don't want people to know. They use national security as a cover. But again, where in the Constitution does it say they can hide things from the people? It doesn't. Now we see out in Washington, we understand there was a drone that flew into Washington, and then all of a sudden, maybe a week later, they were coming up with regulations to control drones, and they're coming up with more regulations. And we see the U.S. Secret Service, they are flying drones in the skies above the nation's capital as part of tests to see how to shoot them down. That's very interesting. What are they afraid of? Are they afraid that when this system comes collapsing down, that people are going to use their drones to see what's going on? To spy on what's happening, to see and use it as a tactical advantage to remove the government and the central bank? Because they seem very nervous about this. And we see they're doing this in the evening, and they're flying the zones around Washington. And they're trying to figure out the best way to bring them down. So we see them pushing the barriers for all government buildings further and further out because they are using the premise that people are trying to break in. So they're saying we need more security. They're adding more security to every single government building. They're pushing regulations on people who fly drones. And now they're practicing getting rid of the drones that are flying over the Capitol. Very interesting on what they're doing at this point. Now we understand that the United States government central bankers have said that Venezuela now is a national security threat. Venezuelan President Maduro has accused the U.S. of trying to defeat and intervene in his government. If the people in Venezuela are unhappy with the government, it is their business to overthrow the government, not the United States. If the people in the United States feel that their government is not working for the people, it is the business of the people in the United States to overthrow their government. But again, the central bankers, the U.S. government, their whole plan is to have regime change, not for the benefit of the people. It's to benefit themselves, to put their oil on the U.S. dollar, to implement a central bank, and to rape and steal from the country and get all their natural resources. This is their plan for every country. This is what they do. And again, if we're having problems in any country, would it be okay for China to come into the U.S. and have regime change? Would it be okay for England to come in and have a regime change here in the United States? No. Again, there's no reason for the United States to even have anything to do with Venezuela at this time. But we know why they are. And think about it. They're going on the agenda of human rights. Well, don't we have human rights violations right here in this country? What about the black site in Chicago where people are being tortured? What about Gitmo, Guantanamo Bay, where they're torturing people? They're not even on trial. They haven't even been proved guilty. They're just torturing them. The same thing's happening in Chicago, and we're finding out there are other sites in Chicago. And I'm sure there are going to be other ones popping up in all different cities, because if once you know there's one, there are many, many more. Now, it looks like Kiev has paid their gas bill, and they're good until March 15th, and then again, they're going to have to make another prepayment. And they're continually doing this. They're not paying for long periods of time. They're only giving a small chunk that will last about 5 to 10 days because they're trying to wean themselves off of the gas from Russia. They're trying to get the gas from the European neighbors. And it's not going well at this point. What's very interesting, when the Ukrainian armed forces were fighting against the militia, the southeastern militias, they had incentives for the armed forces. The Ukrainian president decided to give each person a reward if they shot down a vehicle, a tank, or brought down a warplane. They were going to give $500 If they could destroy destroy a vehicle of the enemy. $2,000 for a disabled tank, $2,500 for a disabled Grad multiple launch rocket system, and $5,000 for a warplane to incentivize the armed forces in bringing down this type of equipment. Poroshenko is out there and he's giving warnings. He's saying that life will not improve in Ukraine because of the tough wartime conditions. He reaffirmed Kiev's plan to fortify its positions and to strengthen the army. He promised to build a powerful system and deeply echeloned fortifications in the east of the country. He said 25% of its manufacturing facilities has come to a standstill and 10% have been destroyed physically. But don't worry. He's going to use the biggest possible defense budget of about $4 billion. So life is going to be hard for the people. But don't worry, we're spending it on weapons. We're spending it on the anti-terrorism forces because we're at war. And this is exactly what the central bankers want. All of this money is going to help the war efforts. None of it is going to the people. And the people will just have to make do. But who will have to pay for all this? It goes right back to the people. Now, the Ukrainian forces continually say they are removing their heavy weaponry from the front line. And they're saying almost all of it has been fulfilled, according to the Minsk agreement. But when we look at exactly what they've done, they didn't abide by the Minsk agreement. What they did is they moved the military equipment about 20 to 30 kilometers back, which is about 12 to 18 miles, which then can be returned right to the front lines. And when they say they removed their heavy weapons, they never give the exact distance from the front line, which is required by the Minsk agreement. And again, you can see they're doing this because they realize eventually they're going to mount a major offensive. Now, it seems that the Ukraine military has received vehicles from the UK, known as Saxons. They came without weapons, but they plan to add the weapons later on. So 20 Saxon armored vehicles had already arrived in the country, and another 55 would be shipped shortly. What do they need all this for? What are they preparing for? They're preparing for a major offensive. They're giving the illusion that they're abiding by the Minsk agreement. So is the United States and UK. Yes, it's a ceasefire. We're in peace. Send in the trainers. Let's start getting the lethal weapons in there. Let's give them more aid. Let's continually do the training. Let's have the propaganda against Russia, how they're invading into Ukraine. They don't want peace. This is not peace. This is warmongering. And we can see that the U.S. is considering putting the training on hold right now because it's starting to look bad. That they're trying to push a ceasefire deal, peace deal. I mean, France is involved, Germany's involved. And the European nations are saying, well, what are you doing? They're trying for a ceasefire and peace. And why are you training the Ukrainian army inside Ukraine? It's completely against the Minsk agreement. So they put it on hold right now. They haven't removed the trainers. They just said, all right, let's just stop training for right now. That's all they did. The U.S. is still considering providing lethal weapons to Ukraine, but there's no time frame and when they may reach a decision. This is coming from the Principal Deputy Undersecretary of Defense for Policy, Brian McKeon. We are still working in the interagency on reviewing a number of options, including lethal defense of weapons. So that is not off the table. It's still on the table. Now, Victoria Nuland is out there, and she's the Assistant Secretary of State. She's explaining this morning that the U.S. can confirm now that new Russian weapons have been delivered to Ukraine and that they can tell when Russia sends in new weapons. We just don't have the proof. We don't have the satellite imagery. We don't have the photography. You're just going to have to believe me that we do have proof. Okay? Everyone believe me? Oh wait, you want proof? I'm sorry, we can't provide it. So far, they haven't provided any proof whatsoever. It'd be nice if they could back up their statements with proof. Then people might they might end up believing them. But without proof, it is very hard to believe what they're saying. And this comment to the Senate committee comes a day after the U.S. delivered lethal aid to Latvia, 120 armored units, including tanks. So basically what they're trying to do is they're taking your eyes off of what is going on in Latvia and trying to convince everyone that things are happening in Ukraine. Why in the world would Russia bring in new weapons at this time when they're pushing a ceasefire deal and peace? It makes no sense. Why would they do this to mess up what is going on? They were winning. They were pushing the Ukrainian forces back. They just could have kept on going. They didn't need time to wait. They had the Ukrainian forces surrounded in Debaltsevo. They captured all of them and their weapons. They could have kept on going up to Mariupol. They could have kept on going and taken over the whole entire country. Now, as the U.S. continually tells everyone that Russia is invading, NATO is saying they're invading, everyone forgets one important thing. The Open Sky Treaty. This was back in 2002, which establishes the mutual aerial observation. And they never bring this up that, yes, many countries have flown over Russia, over the borders, and they took a look. They've taken many, many pictures with high-resolution cameras to see if Russia has troops on the borders. Well, guess what? The U.S. and Czech military experts are going to do this between March 9th and March 14th. They're going to conduct a surveillance flight over Russia as part of the Open Sky Treaty to see what is going on, and they will be taking pictures as they fly over. But everyone forgets to talk about this. And this shows us that if they found something and they snapped a picture, it would be posted all over the place. They'd be playing this up like there's no tomorrow. Now, China looks like they are now building a second aircraft carrier. They denied it, and now it is confirmed that yes, they are. The People's Liberation Army is building the second aircraft carrier, and they are planning on building a total of 4. And we can see they're continually expanding their navy. NATO right now is using the Russian threat as an excuse to halt the defense cuts. It's the same thing that DHS did with all those warnings about terrorism in malls. Hey, what happened to that? Oh, that's right, they got funded, so it just completely disappeared. Actually, they don't even talk about it anymore. Have you noticed? It was fake propaganda. That's all it was. The Egyptian president is out there. He is pushing for U.S. military aid to fight the Islamic State. U.S. General Martin Dempsey has warned that sectarian divisions in Iraq could end up breaking apart the U.S. coalition fighting against the Islamic State. He's saying that there's a huge division between Sunnis and Shiites, and bringing them together has not been fulfilled. The people in these countries are rising up. They don't want this government anymore. They do not want this puppet government. And they're saying that this is becoming a huge problem. What they're trying to say is that the people are rising up, and we might not be able to control what is going on here. Just like we couldn't control what was going on in Yemen, Libya, we're losing control in Lebanon, and Iraq. And we're seeing, and the U.S. government central bankers are telling us that the Islamic State franchises now are popping up all across Africa. Of course they are. We know that Boko Haram now pledge their allegiance to the Islamic State in Nigeria, because now the United States can go into that country. And now the Islamic State is popping up all across Africa, because where does the United States government central bankers need to go? They need to go into all those countries that Russia and China are in. And they're going to use the Islamic State to do this. So the Islamic State is the proxy army of the United States government central bankers, along with Israel, UK, and other countries. And they're using it to get into those countries they want to get into, and those countries they need to get back into to reinstate the puppet regime. This is exactly what's going on here at this point, because we can see the central bankers are losing control of the Middle East. And once they lose control of the Middle East, and they lose control of selling the oil, not using the dollar, that's when things really start to fall apart. And we're starting to see a spark of this in Libya. And this is why the EU, the US, they want to put up a blockade to block all oil exports. Because the people now are selling the oil. And they're not using the US dollar. And they need to stop this. Because once this starts to happen and it spreads across the Middle East, all the other countries do not have to hold the US dollar in reserves because they don't have to pay for the oil using the US dollar. What would be the purpose to hold onto it? Zero. This was the whole part of the petrodollar. So once they get rid of it, where are all these dollars going to go? It's going to flow back to the United States. We will see hyperinflation. What I believe is going to happen, we see deflation, and it's almost like a tidal wave, where the water exceeds. That's deflation. And then it comes back as a huge tidal wave and hits the shores. And that's inflation. Actually, hyperinflation. And this is what I believe is going to happen. Now, it looks like the Islamic State has put up a caliphate book to compete against Facebook because they're being banned from Facebook and Twitter. And as soon as they put it up, it was then taken down. What's interesting is that the site was registered and hosted by a U.S. internet provider, GoDaddy. And the name that registered this was Abu Musab. And of course, this could be a made-up name. And it's funny how they decided to host it right here in the United States. The entire site was hosted on a shared hosting site, which could never support a Facebook type of site with what they wanted to do. It's not built for massive traffic or security whatsoever. So we can see this was complete propaganda to make people believe the Islamic State is doing this type of work. And then it was completely taken down right after that. What I find very interesting is that the United States government central bankers have been using the Islamic State to show us that they are using cyber attacks, or they're trying to get into the social medias along with North Korea, along with China, along with Russia, to show us they have the ability to do these things, when we know for a fact that this is all complete propaganda. Because when this entire system comes down, they need a way to show that another group or country actually had a hand in this, that destroyed the economy. This is why all of this has been set up. I mean, they've created the kill switches in the stock market, NASDAQ, and the BATS system to stop the markets from crashing. We have the bail-in documents already prepared. All 31 banks now are prepared for when a collapse happens, which means a bail-in. We see right now the bankers have covered themselves in the derivative market by putting in that rider on the spending bill. We see right now that they're trying to control the student loan bubble by allowing bankruptcies, because everything is starting to fall apart. And we see the real estate bubble, we see the derivative bubble, we see the stock market bubble, we see the auto loan bubble. All these bubbles are reaching the maximum inflation of the bubble. And eventually, what's going to happen, they're just going to pop. Just like they did all the other times. But this time, it is going to be so much worse. There are no more bailouts from the government. There are only bail-ins. And many people got hurt in the first round. They never recovered. This round, it's going to be the rest of the people. And there's no way out of it, and they know it. It was a good run for the last 6 years or so. 7 years, going on the 7th year. Maybe one more year, but I can't believe this is going to last that much longer. Because the steps they are taking right now to protect themselves is increasing. And we see the provoking of war is increasing. And this tells us, this is an indicator, not a prediction. It's an indicator to show us that we are getting closer and closer. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.